I'm Paul DeGarabedian, Senior Media Analyst for ComScore. I'm thrilled to be joined by Scott Movie Mantz, my brother from another mother, on the latest Ticket to Ride podcast with my co-host Thaddeus Bouchard from Screen Dollars and Mike Polydor's Paper Airplane Media. Welcome, all of you. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you so much for having me. First of all, I love the title of your show, Ticket to Ride. I mean, come on, the Beatles, baby. But yes, makes perfect sense talking about
Scott, what's your license plate on your car?
It's BEATL 68, Beetle 68.
There you go.
I love it.
I think we have an episode title here right now.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, I think we're at a great time here. First, I want to talk about Scott's new podcast. Scott, what's it called? And what is the focus? Here on our Ticket to Ride podcast, we like to highlight other creators. And tell us a little bit about your new podcast, Scott.
Okay, well, I've been interviewing filmmakers and actors for the last 30 years. The biggest names in Hollywood: Tom Cruise, George Clooney, Spielberg, Julia Roberts, you name it. And so it just was something I always wanted, was to have my own movie, TV interview series interviewing actors and filmmakers. It's called Consider This.
And
it's a
Consider This with Scott Mantz. I love it.
There you go. So it's like for your consideration, but consider this. So every episode, I'll be interviewing actors and filmmakers from the latest Oscar and Emmy contenders, but also past classics. And just to get the podcast going, I have the first 2 episodes already posted. So episode 1 is on the making of Election, where I interviewed Reese Witherspoon, Matthew Broderick, director Alexander Payne, and that was a big get. And also the second episode is about the making of The Virgin Suicides with Kirsten Dunst and Josh Hartnett and Sofia Coppola, to get, all these actors and directors all ready. And, I'm also, like I said, looking back on past classics, and I'm very, very big on the movies of 1999. I just think it's the greatest year ever for movies, and I just love to highlight that year when you had like the Blair Witch Project, The Sixth Sense, Election, Eyes Wide Shut, The Matrix.
There's a great book. There's a great book about that year. Like, I think it's called The Greatest Movie Year Ever. Yes. And I agree with you. And I want to also talk. And by the way, I'm just throwing our hat in the ring. I know you have all these famous actors on your podcast, but Mike and Thaddeus and I are available anytime to come on your show.
Well, I did interview. I did a Q&A with the author of 1999 Best Movie Year Ever.
Love it.
In Pasadena over the summer last year, when we were doing a Q&A for Magnolia, which is a movie I really love. But anyway, so, that's the podcast. It's called Consider This with Scott Mantz. It's on Apple, it's on Spotify, it's on Amazon, and it is on YouTube. So you can either watch it or listen to the audio, whatever you want to do.
God, this has been a long time coming. I mean,
it really has been a long time coming. And I was always busy just, doing work for other people, and which I'm still doing. But it was a long time coming and a dream come true for me to do my own interview series. So here it is. So I hope you will all check out Consider This with Scott Mantz, and thank you for the plug, my friend.
Of course.
It's funny. I can't wait to, Scott and I were with Thaddeus talking about it just briefly, and that was 1999, obviously. You mentioned the Blair Witch Project, and I was knee deep in that back in my Artisan Entertainment days.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to hear the other side of the story from the filmmakers. I know what it was like from our end, what we did, and to hear how it affected their lives is that should be something.
Mike, wasn't that one of the first internet-based marketing campaigns for that movie?
Yeah, and as I was telling the guys, John Hageman gets all of the credit on that. So John, who was the head of marketing at Artisan at the time, he came up with the idea, we are not going to let anyone know that this is not true.
Right,
we're going to play it up like this actually happened. And we had a lot of fun with that. And I knew it was something. I was at a theater manager meeting in Northern California, and I had a guy come up to me, and he was visibly shaken, and he said, "Please tell me that Heather and Mike are okay.
Right.
I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, from the movie Blair Witch, please tell me they're okay. And I looked at him, and I didn't say anything because I couldn't blow the cover. But at the same time, I'm like, wow, I think we're onto something here. And we really played it up too, because we actually created a Blair Witch traveling museum that we put at the Sony Lincoln Square. Like, we totally played up into artifacts that had been found, this and that. Like, we really had some fun with the whole thing. So it was a classic.
Well,
That's
I mean,
amazing.
I already recorded an episode for the Blair Witch Project for Consider This. So it's with the 2 directors and 3 of the producers. And it's about a 45-minute conversation. You know, I usually try to keep these things pretty tight at like 30 minutes or so. But it was such a fascinating conversation that they just kept going and going and going. And so much stuff that even I didn't know about the making of this movie. So that's going to post in the middle of August. You know, on my YouTube channel is Scott Mantz, but you could also, like I said, just search for Consider This.
And we'll put links at the description of our of this episode as well, so everyone can find it.
Thank you so
Sure.
much.
And
Paul,
oh, hold on a sec, Mike. I want to stay on the Blair Witch thing real quick. I'm going into the engine room at ComScore, and I'm looking up the Blair Witch Project, and wow, that movie opened in one theater? Opening weekend?
It did not open in one theater. I believe we were in, I want to say we were 56 locations.
Well, I'm looking and I'm seeing like one loc and then 27 because it opened on a Wednesday, I think. Anyway.
Oh, we did. We opened the New Art. The New Art was the first theater we opened. Then we expanded. You're right, 27 theaters. We did $63,000 per screen average, I believe, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
It was crazy. So, you know, going back to that, we played the block in Orange County, and you know, it was very controversial at the time because it was a competitive zone where you had, and competitive zones meant if one theater had it, the other theater necessarily wouldn't. And Century, owned by Sayufi, had the Orange Theater. AMC had built the block. They were having a tough time getting product. We ended up playing that. We set the record at the block, $350,000 for the week, opening week when we were down there. And I'll never forget, because this was pre-digital, so everything was 35 millimeter prints. And they're calling, and they're basically saying, can you get us more prints? We were scurrying around the office because everything had been made, and there were 2 screening prints that were at the screening room. So Larry McCourt picked them up and drove them down to Orange County. That is true story. They were adding show times as soon as they could get prints.
So its first full weekend was $1.5 million. Second full weekend, 1.978 million. Third weekend, it went into 1,100 theaters, $29 million. What a perfect platform release.
And then it probably played for 25 weeks.
It played for a while. Here's another fun story about that. So as we're setting the movie, you know, we have exhibitors across the country who are saying, you know, you're going in the heart of summer. You guys aren't getting play dates. It's not happening. You know, good luck getting runs. And as soon as we went out and we did the 63,000 per screen, all of a sudden how many do you need? Yeah. You know, and Warner's actually had to move, I believe it was Into the Deep, which was the Thomas Jane shark movie.
Oh yeah.
That was a big movie that they had.
I actually like that movie.
It was Deep Blue Sea. That movie.
Oh, Deep Blue Sea. Thank you, Scott. Yeah. So they actually had to move it because we were a tsunami that came in. So they pushed it back by a couple of weeks.
Tell you, so the movie was acquired at Sundance for $1 million. It went on to gross $240 million. Probably the most profitable movie ever made. But you know, it was a couple years before I started going to Sundance. So I had I read about it, you know, in the trades and everything. So after Sundance and before the release date was announced, a friend of mine gives me a videotape of this movie, The Blair Witch Project, and tells me that the shit is real.
You believed it.
I totally believed it because the marketing campaign, that was what it was. It was like the cat was out of the bag.
Yes.
When it came out, but But at that time, it was still like, is this real or isn't it? So here I am watching a grainy videotape at home by myself.
Right.
I thought this shit was real. And it scared the hell out of me.
And think about that. That's Scott and everybody. That's 1999, and to have that kind of viral. I mean, that's a long ass time.
It was really the first viral movie. Well, this is great, and again, just like weird things that happened on the movie. So we're getting ready. We're about a week out from release, and part of my job at that point too was like print control and operations. And I get a call from the lab, Deluxe, and Michael George, who runs the lab over there, said, "Hey, how wide do you think you guys are going on this?" And I'm like, "Look, the movie takes off. We could be in a couple of thousand theaters." And he's like, "Well, you realize this is an acetate IN that you have here." And of course, I'm like, "What does that mean?" And he goes, "Basically, it means you can get about 300 prints off of it before it falls apart. And then you have to do another one."
Wow.
And I'm like, "Okay, how much is another, IN for it?" And he goes, "That'll be whatever it was." And then we started talking about it, and I'm like, "So, but if we need 2,000 prints, how are we going to do it?" And he goes, "Well, the only way to do it is if you go to a polyester IP." And polyester was, so acetate was more old school film. Polyester was like, literally, they talked about the polyester film. You could tie it to a tractor and, pull it. So it was like $8,000 to do that. And he said, but the one thing you have to remember is you're going to go from an acetate IN, you have to make a polyester IP and then a polyester IN. And then every step of the way, you're going to lose a little bit of the clarity of the film. Right. And all I said is, have you seen this movie? It's only going to make it better. And literally, we got the approval. We did it. And had we not done that, there's no way we could have gotten to the 2,000.
Talk about supply and demand. And if you talk about the inner negative, the inner positive, and acetate, there's hundreds of films that are lost that were on acetate stock. You put a mask here, it just goes up like...
It just kind of just, crumbles.
So they were doing acetate in 99?
Well, it was black and white. So we had just actually gone through the whole thing on Darren Aronofsky's movie Pi. So I was very familiar on this whole black and white thing. It's a big pain in the neck. And we talked about going to the polyester, and literally it was just a function of how the hell are we going to get to, be able to get to 2,500 runs or whatever it is. And that's how we did it. So anyway, long story short.
And Scott, you talked about election. That's a fantastic. So on your on a future podcast episode, or has that one dropped yet?
It's already posted. The first 2 episodes of Consider This are already uploaded. They're already posted on YouTube if you want to make it easy and find it there. But the first episode, like I said, it was about election. Which is a movie that didn't really do well when it came out in 1999, but it has since become a beloved classic, a movie that holds up really well. And the fact that I was able to get Reese Witherspoon, who by the way, when I was booking the talent for that particular episode, Matthew Broderick was in New York, Reese Witherspoon was in Nashville, Alexander Payne was in L.A. So thanks to the beauty of these platforms like Riverside and Zoom, I was able, with the help of their personal publicists, by the way, who really went to bat for me, to work out their schedules where they were able to block out some time. And I got to say, too, this made me feel, this was sort of the thing that made me feel like I really should be doing this, is when we sat down, and I was waiting, I was on the Zoom, which is where I did it, and Reese was the first one to sign in. And, we were waiting for Matthew Broderick and for Alexander Payne. And, I've interviewed Reese many times, and I said, "Oh, hey, it's great to see you. How are you? Nice to see you." And I said, "Really, I can't thank you enough for making the time for this, because, it wasn't a paid gig at all." And she goes, "Well, when I heard that it was you, I said yes, because you always ask such great and thoughtful questions." Yeah. And that made me, I'm like, man, I wish I was recording that.
Wait, let me press record, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's from conversations I had with her or of Q&As she saw me do elsewhere, because I do a lot of Q&As for the SAG and for the Producers Guild, and of course Playdate Q&As. I love doing these types of conversations, and that to hear that from her, Reese Witherspoon, is really a hell of a compliment, and sort of really was made me go, yeah, this is something that's a long time coming. And I always do Q&As for other people, but now I'm doing them for myself. So I really hope that people tune in, watch it, listen, and enjoy it.
We'll get the word out. We'll get the word out for sure.
We will. I mean, you built a reputation over the years, Scott. I mean, you've been doing this for as long or longer than I have, which is a long time. And Scott and I used to do a box office showdown.
Hollywood, yeah.
Access Hollywood on air. Was that in the 90s or the early 2000s? And we would go into the studio over there in Burbank, and we'd sit down. It was like a little movie theater in there. And we would sit down and we would film that. Or we were in the trailers back there. There were like actual trailers where we would shoot. But that was a lot of fun way back in the day. So box office is still a thing, that's for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Meanwhile, talking about box office this summer, and I've been saying, I just did an interview earlier this week on KTLA in the morning. They brought me in to talk about Fantastic Four box office, and it turned into a larger conversation. And you guys, I'm sure, especially you, Paul, will vouch for this.
Yeah.
That summer 2025 is a return to form for the box office. For the first time since the summer of 2019, the last summer that we had before the world changed with the pandemic.
Right.
Every weekend, one weekend after another, big opening, movies that are making hundreds of millions of dollars worldwide. And I guess it was a week or two ago, I saw a headline for a story on Deadline, and the headline was Superman passes 500 million. F1, the Brad Pitt movie, passes 500 million. Lilo and Stitch passes 1 billion. Jurassic World passes 700 million.
Right.
When was the last time we had a story that said about all these movies really doing well, especially internationally? Paul.
This is, I mean, look, if you go back to 23, the Barbenheimer summer, where we did get over 4 billion, and I predicted that early on, and luckily it happened. I've gone out on a limb and said that this year we're running about 11% ahead of last summer. And it's funny, Scott, and all of you, we've talked about this a lot. I keep saying it's one of the greatest summers ever, and people go, oh, it's the highest grossing. I'm like, no, I don't conflate grosses with the quality of the movies.
Right.
I just feel like what a great, and you're right, Scott, and Mike and Thaddeus have talked about this, week after week, a relentless onslaught. Now, there's been some casualties of that. There have been some movies that have gotten caught in the crossfire, but overall, you just said it.
But let's talk.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect segue into kind of talking about the summer. And here we are, the first day of August, and we're looking back at where we've been. And to Scott's point, it has been a phenomenal summer when you look at it. It's something for everybody. Yep. And for the first time post-pandemic, we're not looking at a summer that's being dragged by like a specific movie. We're not talking about where last year it was, basically Inside Out and Deadpool that kind of combined to, drag us, along. You're talking about the wealth has been, spread out. And there have been movies for everybody, all sorts of things. You look at where Jurassic is, over $300 million domestically. You look at, F1, which is what a fun ride that movie is. Jerry Bruckheimer, this guy just knows how to make entertaining movies. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like you go in there, it's a great popcorn movie. Yep. Just saw Superman this week. And I can see why Superman is a bit polarizing in what it is, because it's not your typical Superman movie. I thought it was fantastic. I loved it. Probably my favorite part of that movie too was the first, kind of minute and a half of it where they put the cards up and kind of explained. And it's basically James Gunn's way of saying, You know, you don't need an hour of exposition of where Superman came from. Like, you guys all know it. Here's the background. Let's go. Let's get in the story.
I'm more a Fantastic Four guy than Superman, I just have to say. But I want to go through a lightning round kind of quick because it's the day of taping right now, Scott, is August 1st. And I made a list of movies that have been released in August, which I've always called the punk rock month or the Rodney Dangerfield of months for the summer. But some very edgy movies have come out in August historically. No different this year. It's sort of, as in 2025, as in the 80s, the summer movie that come out in August are a little on the cutting edge. So I'm going to throw out a couple of titles. I know, Scott, you're a student of film. Yeah. You talked about in you're going back in your new podcast talking about older movies, which that history is so important. So Fast Times at Ridgemont High opened in August. Apocalypse Now, Risky Business,
Risky Business,
Wild at Heart, Casualties of War, Year of the Dragon, The Commitments, District 9, Inglourious Basterds, Straight Outta Compton, American Graffiti. Your thoughts?
Well, did you mention Inglourious Basterds? I think
Yeah.
August 11th of 2009. I think that was the date.
I bet you're right.
But August is, well, first of all, we're taping this August 1st, and even though you have the big blockbusters like Jurassic World and Superman and Fantastic Four, they've already come out. You still have upcoming Freakier Friday, which is the first. It's the reunion of Lindsay Lohan, who's terrific in the film, and Jamie Lee Curtis. 22 years after the first Freaky Friday, with the two of them, made $161 million worldwide, which is really good for a movie like that. Right. But it's always with August, and I think Weapons, which also was August 8th, that movie I think is going to be a sleeper because everyone is excited about it. Yeah, I think that has the potential to be a sleeper. Also, the movie Together with Dave Franco and Alison Brie, great movie. It already opened Wednesday, but it's always really, Paul, it's the first weekend of August. Because after that first weekend, summer kind of like fizzles out. People are going back to school. They're taking their last-minute vacations. Right. The studios don't really see the second half of August as a viable release because people are preoccupied with other things, and they're not movies. Even if they have an opening weekend, that's pretty decent.
You're right. The Labor Day weekend has often been left out in the cold. This year, that's not happening. But that really is the Rodney Dangerfield of holiday weekends in the summer, because there have been years where there wasn't a single brand new wide release on Labor Day. And Mike can correct because Mike knows that.
So, you just got to, Scott makes a great point. So, Labor Day is, and it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's the last weekend of the summer. Everybody's preoccupied with outdoors, with barbecues, things like that. And then, of course, go back to, I believe it was 21, we had Shang-Chi that, basically said, give them a good movie on Labor Day, and guess what? People will show up.
Exactly. Mike, that is an asterisk, and I'm glad you brought up Shang-Chi. I was going to mention that. That did open, I think it was Labor Day weekend or maybe the weekend after, but Shang-Chi, you're talking about Labor Day weekend in 2021, the people were kind of coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Instead of previous years where people were planning barbecues and kind of, getting back into the school.
Well, the only thing I would say, Scott, is that yes, to a point, and that is that weekends, it's all self-fulfilling is what it comes down to. Yeah. And we've talked about this on the podcast before. When I was at Lionsgate, we had Hunger Games, and we went out in March with the movie. And March had never been viewed as, a blockbuster weekend. The only movie that really had done any business there, and which was the one that we actually based it on, was Alice in Wonderland. Alice did 110. We felt like we could get out there and we could do, Hunger Games goes out and does $154 million, and all of a sudden March is a great month to release movies. So the idea being, it is self-fulfilling, and the studios tend to, I stay away from this weekend because traditionally it's bad. Traditionally it's bad because you don't put the content there, is what it comes down to. Now there are,
but I think people went to see Shang-Chi because that year and the year before, it just threw everybody off. The sketch, people were it was like Groundhog Day. They were living the same day over and over because they were stuck inside. So, you have a big movie like Shang-Chi, which is actually a good Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, and people were just like let's go, and people were really starting.
And they use these months as a test kitchen in a way. Like if you look at the first Matrix movie came out March 31st, which isn't exactly March. It's really an April movie, but that one came out. The first Guardians of the Galaxy opened in August. So, and then only once has a August movie opened to over 100 million. I don't think we're going to see any 100 million, but in putting these superhero movies, Suicide Squad 2016, $133.7 million debut weekend of August 5 of 2016, and then Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one, and M. Night Shyamalan, a big factor in the top grossing movies of August. The Sixth Sense, yep.
Yeah, and actually August 6th, 1999, talk about a stacked weekend. You had Sixth Sense, which went on to make, like Paul's showed here, $294 million domestic. And then also that same weekend you had Mystery Men, which is like the spoof of like superheroes before the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah, that's right.
That same day, and this is also a film that I did a conversation for on my Consider This podcast, an animated classic that bombed on its release because there were so many other movies opening. That is The Iron Giant.
Oh yeah.
Sure.
Oh, and it's considered today a classic.
Absolutely, It is. And I interviewed two of the producers, and I interviewed Eli Marienthal, the actor who voices Hogarth in the movie.
That's so cool.
That episode is dropping on Consider This next week. And wait till you hear that conversation. That's
going to be cool, man. Consider This. That's Scott Mantz's Movie Mantz's podcast. Yeah. I'm going to look up that weekend, Scott and guys, Thaddeus and Mike, August 6th through the 8th. 6th through 8th. And yes, Sixth Sense opened to 26.7 million. The Blair Witch Project, which had been out since the middle of July, was number 2 with 24 million. Runaway Bride had opened on the 30th of July.
Right.
20.8 million. There were, okay, guys, not adjusted for inflation, 3 movies that earned over $20 million back over the Sixth Sense weekend. That's insane. Deep Blue Sea, like you mentioned earlier. But Thomas Crown Affair was at number 4, and then Deep Blue Sea, number 5. Scott, you're amazing. Mystery Men, as you mentioned. Iron Giant was out that weekend. The number 10 movie, this is a great trivia question that you can use. The number 10 movie, according to our ComScore data, the weekend that Blair Witch Project opened over the weekend of August 6th of 99 was American Pie, which had opened a month before on July 9. It was a different era back then, totally different.
Think about how different all of those movies are too, in terms of the genre of each one of those movies is unique to each other, So.
Yeah,
they're all very, very different. I'm curious, Paul. You're looking at that weekend of August 6th.
Yeah.
So I think it was maybe 3 weeks before that, or 2 weeks before that, on July 16th. Stanley Kubrick's final movie, Eyes Wide Shut, opened in theaters.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was like it had a big opening with like
21.7 million. And I have to tell you, Mike has great stories from, his history in the industry, Thaddeus as well. I remember going to the Eyes Wide Shut screening that Warner Brothers put on. Every other studio person was at that screening. I have never seen, Stanley Kubrick's final film. I mean, it was like a summit of all the people from every studio. It was at, I think, the GCC Sherman Oaks, which is no longer there. And
you know what? I was at that screening as well, Paul. Now you're bringing it up. I'm like, I remember that.
Right? I had never seen, and I'm glad you this is what we do on Ticket to Ride. We riff up. None of this is planned for those listening. We had no agenda other than to highlight Scott Mantz. But wow, yeah, that was really something. And you're right, Scott, that movie did come out. But I mean, when you're talking about weekends that are generating back then, the Sixth Sense weekend generated around $160 million unadjusted. But what a great weekend. We go in the time machine. So Eyes Wide Shut opened, you're right, Scott, over the weekend of July 16 to 21.7. The number 2 movie was American Pie. Lake Placid was number 3. Big Daddy was number 4.
Big Daddy. Right.
And get this, Wild Wild West, the Will Smith Wild Wild West rounded out the top 5.
I gotta say,
Yeah.
you know what? I'm sorry, Will. I hate to take it. That was one awful movie.
Will Smith chose to make Wild Wild West over another movie that he was offered but did not understand. That movie was The Matrix.
How fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
There, see, you get, this is the kind of content you get here.
Well, hey, Paul, real quick, too, let's shift back to this year for a second.
Yeah.
Through July 31st, if you look at summer, including everything yesterday, we're sitting right at $3 billion. So
do I get my extra billion and get to
that's the question. Is there $1 billion left?
We'll have
I'm
to do
gonna run last year.
a fundraiser for August. We're going to raise $1 billion in August.
That's a great idea, Patty.
You know what? I think there is. I
I'm going to run the month of August in our ComScore engine room. So last year it was Deadpool Wolverine accounted for 34% of the full August box office, August 1 through August 31. That month generated $911 million.
Wow.
We had Deadpool Wolverine, It Ends With Us, Twisters, Alien Romulus, Despicable Me 4, which, by the way, was the top movie of July that year with $312 million. But I'm really hoping we can... look, we got Fantastic Four, much like Deadpool and Wolverine, playing into this month. But does the rest of this have the horsepower to give me that $1 billion or give us? It's not my billion. I wish.
Well, look, this year the difference is, to your point, Fantastic Four, Superman, Jurassic still doing business, F1 still doing some business. To Scott's point, we have Together that's entering the fray this week, along with Bad Guys and Naked Gun. And I have a feeling, we haven't talked much about Naked Gun. Coming into the weekend, they're sitting at over 90% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. They have an 87% score with audiences. That has all the markings of a runner, as I like to say. One of those movies that are just, you're going to take a look, in the middle of September and go, how did they get to that gross?
And Scott, what's the running time on this thing?
And Naked Gun is only 85 minutes long.
Yes.
It's also a type of movie, obviously a comedy, that has not, there not been some huge splashes recently. So it could sort of strike a nerve. It's like, a comedy. And I think that's part of what can make a film sort of rise in its profile unexpectedly, is it's coming out of left field a little bit. And I think a comedy has that opportunity.
And the whole Pam Liam thing isn't hurting.
Oh, yeah, the fact that they're dating.
Yeah.
Something good came out of that movie. Yeah. Look, I think, the way, you talk about, Deadpool Wolverine, you talk about Inside Out 2, you talk about Barbenheimer, also films like, obviously, Top Gun Maverick and Elvis. You have hit movies, but up until this summer, those hit movies were, spread out. They weren't consistent. They weren't every weekend like they were in whether it's 1999 or 2019. But this summer, you do have hit movies every single weekend. The only, I think, studio release that kind of bombed, was, last year Pixar had Inside Out 2, which is the highest grossing American-made animated feature of all time.
Right.
But then Elio bombed. That was a Pixar movie that bombed. It made less sense.
Well, but that's... I'm going to say, and this is something, I've kind of been harping on, probably for the last 6 months, and that is there is a bigger issue out there, Scott, and that is original IP is struggling.
Yeah.
And, and we had a long discussion about this on a previous podcast where we talked about just the issues with marketing today and the idea that linear marketing through TV doesn't exist anymore. And so to get somebody interested in something like Elio or, Drop or Black Bag, really hard to do because you have, in digital marketing, you've got 8 seconds, whatever it is, to get their attention before they can hit skip. It's one thing if it's it's something I know, it's IP I'm familiar with.
Right.
But when you're trying to convince me on something that I haven't,
And guys, do you think though it's because if you're a family, you're going to buy anywhere from, I would imagine, 2 to 10 tickets if you're taking friends, families. So if you don't know what it's all about, maybe you're more reticent to spend the dough.
Well, back in the Blair Witch days, right? Things could build gradually over time, and now that's another dynamic that has obviously taken hold in the industry. Is most of the box office for many of these films happens in the first 2 or 3 weeks.
That's true.
Right.
So you really have to have marketed that
Well,
film
but
successfully on opening weekend.
I mean, if you look at something like Ilio, the critics liked it, the audiences liked it. The movie, in all, should have worked, I guess, is what it comes down to. Obviously, there was a lot of family film out this summer that also played to it. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I'm looking at, this goes back to what we were talking about, and that is spreading the wealth. Lilo and Stitch, the top grossing movie of the summer season, $420 million, but only 14% of the overall marketplace,
That's right.
which is fantastic. It just means, again, that there was a lot of movies out there doing business. We weren't relying on one film.
Well,
Yeah, the wealth
also,
is definitely spread. Yeah, the wealth is spread.
Yeah, by the time Elio came out, you had like one family film after another because Lilo and Stitch was #1 for I think 3 weeks in a row.
Yep.
And then How to Train Your Dragon opened. That movie did open really, really strong. And Lilo and Stitch, IP. How to Train Your Dragon, IP. Elio is not IP. So I think.
But Elio has had some legs. It actually is held in there pretty well, Elio, because I think it's a really good movie. So that's good. But yeah, you're right, Scott. I mean, it's very interesting to look at that. But going back to August, we do have Weapons and Caught Stealing. So those are originals.
I think the other test for IP or original content is happening this weekend with Together. So Together opened on Wednesday to kind of get a jump start on the weekend. Up until this weekend, it was at like 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. Now it's like closer to 91%, which makes sense. I saw the movie at Sundance. I think it's a great body horror type of movie along the lines of like The Substance. But Dave Franco and Alison Brie, who star in the film and are producers in the film, they have been everywhere promoting this movie.
Scott, they were at the Vista. I think they showed it at Tarantino's theater, the Vista, and they were posting it. You're exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing too is just to keep in mind too so Together is coming out through Neon. And Neon and I would say A24 have been very good at navigating through what I would call this post-linear TV world. Like I wouldn't say everybody has cracked the code, but I would say they're very comfortable in that marketplace.
Well, I think you have, now, you talk about linear TV kind of going the way of the dinosaurs in Jurassic World. I've noticed, my time doing like what I do, I have seen the shift from linear TV, where you have print journalists, broadcast journalists on red carpets, at press events and press junkets, getting priority to interview the actors and the filmmakers, whereas now that shift has turned to the I word, influencers. Influencers who have, like, for whatever reason, 1 million followers on TikTok or whatever, and they are getting priority access to talent, to set visits, over seasoned veteran journalists.
Well, that's happening in all aspects of
politics
news.
for sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
politics for sure. The influencers are having a huge influence because they have a huge audience.
Right.
Well,
it really has democratized the ability of those who are not with legacy media or traditional outlets to have a huge voice because they're building that themselves.
Yeah, I mean, look, they I give a lot of credit to whoever it is who's gets 1 million followers on TikTok.
Well, Scott, you're on your way, dude. Like, I see this happening for you. And then just remember the little people, when you get there. So we got to wrap it here in a few minutes. Scott Mantz.
For example, I just wanted to say, like, when I was the weekend that Disney junketed Freakier Friday, I covered that junket. I did the interviews for KTLA. That very same day at the Four Seasons, Disney was junketing Fantastic Four. KTLA was not approved by Disney to cover the junket for Fantastic Four. They prioritized influencers and did not have time for certain, regular.
Well, but that, Scott, that goes back to the whole thing where if you're a studio marketing person and you're sitting there going like, I need to get mass reach, and I can't do it anymore. I don't have Thursday night must-see TV of Friends where I can put a commercial and everyone's going to see it. Those days are gone. I can, maybe a sporting event I can get away with it, but that's about it. Yep. How is and there's, by the way, I don't think they've cracked the code on the influencers either, because all influencers are not created equal, and just because somebody's got, just because somebody has 1 million followers, are they getting any real engagement? Can they actually, get a call to action?
Is it moving the needle? I don't know if it is, but I don't work in publicity or marketing. So
it is, look, I mean, this is it's a longer conversation. This is why I always say that, our friends in exhibition are very important when it comes to marketing movies, because they can reach actual moviegoers. Somebody who's actually spent $12-15 or more these days to go to the film. So it's we're in a very interesting dynamic that's changing daily on how to do this. And, Together is a really good, kind of example of that alternative marketing that's kind of evolving of, I'm guessing they didn't spend a nickel on a TV ad.
Probably not.
Well, that earned impressions are money in the bank, literally. I mean, it's
if you get the right guy, if you get the right impression coming from there.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, guys, we gotta wrap. I want you to consider this. Always listen to Ticket to Ride. Yes. And then you have to watch and listen to all of us, but you don't have to. But we encourage you to check out Scott Mantz, our esteemed guest. His new podcast, Consider This, where he has the top filmmakers, talent both in front of and behind the camera. We highly recommend you check that out. Scott, you're the greatest. You're again, we got to hang out soon. We'll do the Mad Men dance together. That's an inside kind of scoop there.
Your book over your right shoulder, John and Paul, A Love Story and Song, which is a great book.
I'm going to put our pictures on there, Scott.
Yes. John and Paul.
A love story. I love it. And then Thaddeus Bouchard, of course, our esteemed producer and just an all-around great guy from Screen Dollars, great company. Check out Screen Dollars wherever records and tapes are sold. Same with Paper Airplane Media, Mike Polydorus, my co-host. Thank you so much. But Scott, you're welcome back anytime. You name it. The door's always open over here at Ticket to Ride. Right, guys?
You bet it is. You bet it is.
Scott, it's always a pleasure hanging out with you. Love this.
Right back at you, fellas. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thank you for joining us, Scott. We'll see you at the movies.
Have a great weekend, guys.
Bye-bye.